Well, first of all, it's a great pleasure to be here. I see my talk more as a bridging talk. That is, sure, I'm going to mostly use examples of gene therapy. That's what I'm most familiar with. But we also talk about bad actors, regulations, public concerns in the morning. So you will see that some of the things I highlight actually summarize a little bit of what we discussed this morning. So as Francis said, I'm a sociologist trained in medicine, and I also founded the research center called Center for Global Science and Epistemic Justice at the University of Kent. And one of the questions I focus on is how do we promote accountable science in an ideologically divided world? I mean, this is a thorny issue, and it's really important because it's crucial for the rigor and effectiveness of bioeconomy, and also it's essential to ensure public trust and to facilitate societal uptake and translation of all the latest technical possibilities. But of course, I say it's a thorny issue because we're confronted with a somewhat complicated and paradoxical scenario. That is, on the one hand, while science is conventionally considered as a universal and thus a unifying agent that bridge social and political divisions, it has somewhat become a vehicle through which people articulate their ideological divide and actually in the process exacerbate it rather than mitigate it. I'll give you examples in the life sciences, which is increasingly fueled by a diverse variety of societal incentives and resources. So since 2018, we've seen a number of grassroots initiatives focused on developing copycat gene therapy and in the name of developing improved health for the masses, at the same time disregarding warnings from regulators as from the FDA. And for example, in Honduras, innovators are actually taking advantage of its innovation-friendly policy to recruit patients into the DIY gene therapy clinical trials in the name of developing drugs for everyone. I mean, who could say no to that? And of course, in Montenegro, it is currently considered one of the temporary homes for like-minded innovators to set up a whole different jurisdiction so as to encourage biohacking and encourage the fast-tracking of drugs on aging. So I want to highlight 2 points. One, what we're witnessing is not simply policy shopping. What we're witnessing are an emerging proactive political act to contest existing epistemological as well as social political regimes. And two, I want to say that these are not bad actors, these are not outsiders. Like it or not, these are actors that's going to shape social perception of new technologies, and they are going to shape the policy debate. But I say it is a paradoxical scenario because we're actually not living in a world where anything goes. Actually, on the contrary, all these new emerging forms of innovation, well, of course, they create hopes, but they create risks, and more importantly, they actually add to the social and policy uncertainties. In fact, recently was reported that in a recent National Academy workshop on biomanufacture in the US, participants reported that companies' strategy is they race to be first to be second. The reason is being first means that you carry the extra burden of investing significantly to navigate resource and time to navigate the policy and ethical concerns. So we see all these different phenomena that are happening, and they all underline the value-laden nature of biotech and bioinnovation. And there's another thing I want to highlight. That is, especially these activism-oriented bioinnovation that I just mentioned, they actually highlighted or reminded us that as modern beings, what we really want is perhaps not risk-free, super certain development or progress. What we really want as modern beings is what Franco Berardi called futurability. That is, the ability to develop our potential on our own terms. And of course, this is really what's at the core of regulatory debates here. And the evolving dynamics of science-society relations has add to the complication of how do we align regulations to these new relations. But of course, I'm not just here complaining about new problems. I'm also here to share some of the new tools that I feel that may be helpful to enable us to build choreographies of all these diverse perspectives. I'm going to highlight two things. One is that globally, I do see there's a trend on putting more emphasis on public dialogues and civic engagement. And you may have heard some of the often mentioned examples. For example, I'm based in the UK, so I'm going to say it. Since 2019, the Genomic UK and UKRI's ScienceWise program has already initiated a public dialogue specifically on whether or not we need a new social contract on genome technology. And also in Canada, there's also a pan-Canadian dialogue on how we future biotech so as to improve cross-sectoral benefits. And also, if you're in Australia, you have heard of the Involve Australian initiative, which are particular focus on drawing a guideline of how genetic research should involve consumers. But I said it's a global trend. So these are not just happening in developed countries. What I want to bring your attention to is that a lot of less developed countries have also bolstered their national commitment in this field. For example, in 2021, India's draft 5th National Science and Technology Innovation Policy has devoted a whole chapter on science communication and public engagement, with specific emphasis on public-private partnership and on how to promote two-way dialogue between science and society. And I know that China is setting up a national think tank to fill a very similar mandate. And actually, if we look back to 2019, when the UK, I just probably said the UK launched the national dialogue, South Africa, their white paper on science, technology, and innovation also made the pledge that a certain percentage of their research funding will be dedicated to public dialogue. And this was met with increasing enthusiasm from scientists based in South Africa. And Latin America, too. I mean, Argentina, Brazil, these are the leaders in the Latin American scientific scene in terms of investment, and they're also the national leaders in terms of promoting public dialogue. But what's also interesting in Latin America is that you also see these regional networks, such as RED LCC and RED POP. They're actually providing a more transnational networked initiative on building different types of dialogue. And this is related to the second tool, or second point I want to highlight. That is, with all these emphasis on public dialogue, there's also a shifting mentality on what these public dialogues are for. And this I want to draw your attention. That is, there's an emerging recognition that the success of public dialogue does not necessarily mean that it will end up with public acceptance or even public agreement on anything. In fact, even if there's remain clear social divide after these public engagement initiatives, you will find that these initiatives may nevertheless be very useful. Why? I mean, because what true dialogue can bring is that they help us to understand the contingency and conditionality of different perspectives, and thus enable us to better respond to, avoid, or adapt to these contingencies and conditionalities. And so I'm going to end my talk with an invitation to think and to act. One of the things that frustrates me a little bit is that all these great things that are happening, all these shifts that are happening, are mostly led by government agencies and research institutions. But hey, industry is playing such a big role in leading innovation, and also there's such a growing heterogeneity within industry. It's really hard to define who are the industry actors anymore, right? So I think if we're really serious about looking 20 years ahead, we really need to strategically think about how collectively we can increase industry's voice and industry public dialogue in this regard. And I think that's something that's incumbent upon all of us.
Thank you.